We are on.
All right, I'd like to call to order the February 24th full board meeting of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors. Secretary, please call the roll.
Director Carr has informed that she is running a little bit behind. Director Garcia.
Present.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Present.
Director Herndon.
Present.
Director Leonard.
Present.
Director O'Halloran.
Here.
Director Simpson.
Present.
Vice President Taylor.
Present.
And President Peterson.
Present.
We have 8 present.
I now will ask the Secretary to lead us in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. Members, please mute your devices.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll now read our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Milwaukee lies on traditional Menominee, Potawatomi, and Ho-Chunk homeland along the southwest shores of Lake Michigan, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes. On this site, the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Connecticut rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's Menominee, Ojibwe, Ho-Chunk, Oneida, and Mohican sovereign nations remain present to this day. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas tardes. Esta junta escolar se transmitirá en español para aquellas personas que lo necesiten. Para escuchar esta junta escolar en español, por favor marque el número 312-626-6799. Repito, marque el número 312-626-6799 y ponga el número de identificación o código para esta junta que es 608-130-5362. Repito, el código de identificación es 608-130-5362. Gracias. Thank you.
Pursuant to Board's Rule 1.06, this meeting is being conducted virtually. Board members may be participating in person from Central Services Building. In order to allow as much public access and participation as possible, this meeting is being broadcast on WYMS Radio 88.9 FM and via live stream on MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we move to our agenda, the chair, that's me, will ask that we share in a moment of silence to commemorate the passing of the following members of the MPS community. M. Lucia Cardoso, a retired teacher at La Escuela Fraternal. Jada Clay, a student at Samuel Clemens School. Desiree Fisher, a retired teacher at Townsend Street Elementary. Ramonia Hall, a retired secretary at Vincent High School. Thelma Hobson, a paraprofessional at Pulaski High School. Gabriel Landry, a student at North Division High School. Aviana Mata, a student at Rogers Street Academy. James Anthony McCullough Sr., a retired painter. Michael Sonnenberg, a retired regional superintendent. And Donis Whiting, a retired steam fitter. Please have a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll now move to items on the business of items of business on our agenda. As is customary, the board does not take public testimony during the regular monthly board meetings. However, 2 items on tonight's agenda, items 2 and 3 from the reports and communications from the Office of Board Governance, were noticed for public hearing, and those who wish to give testimony were required to register in advance. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone registered to speak on those items?
Mr. Chair, we have no individuals registered to speak on items 2 or 3 of the
Very well.
reports of the Office of Board Governance.
Thank you. Very well. Madam Secretary, what is our first item of business?
The first item of business on tonight's agenda is the minutes of the January 2022 regular meeting of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Do any members of the board have corrections for the minutes of January 2022? If there being no corrections, the minutes are approved as presented.
So noted.
Okay. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the superintendent?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have 2 communications from the superintendent. And the first is the communication, which is action on a technical amendment for contract number B as in boy, 0001375/contract number 29160. The administration recommends that the board approve a technical amendment to reflect the correct vendor name, which is American United Transportation Group.
Would the superintendent please present this item?
President Peterson, members of the board, Janine Adamczyk, Director of Procurement and Risk Management. We ask that you approve this amendment. When we first presented this contract, we had the vendor's name was American United Taxi Cab Incorporated. Subsequently, they changed their name to American United Transportation Group, and our extensions now read American United Transportation Group. We have the current W-9. Our system is updated accordingly, and we just ask that you accept this amendment.
Thank you. Does the board wish to make any comments? What's the pleasure of the board in regard to this item? Director O'Halloran.
I move we approve the the technical amendment that is brought forth by the administration.
Could I get a
second.
Thank you very much. Was that Director Herndon?
Yes.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Will the secretary please call the roll?
On Director O'Halloran's motion to approve the recommendation for a technical amendment to contract number B 0001375, contract number 29160, as read into the record. Director Carr?
Aye.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry for not acknowledging Director Carr has joined the platform. Director Garcia?
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Herndon?
Aye.
Director Leonard?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Director Simpson?
Aye.
Vice President Taylor?
Aye.
And President Peterson?
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what's the next item?
The next item is in the communications is the monthly report with possible action from the Superintendent of Schools. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the superintendent please present this item?
Good evening, President Peterson and members of the board. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. February's report outlines some of the district's highlights of the month. Black History Month, combined with our Black Lives Matter Week of Action campaign, has engaged both our MPS students and our community members in amazing activities that allowed them to explore Black history, Black films, restorative practice, social equality, and a host of other culturally relevant experiences that have and can contribute to our community. We look forward to the continued learning students will partake in as they continue through Black History Month and the Black Lives Matter campaign. Our amazing month of celebration does not stop here. Our staff has participated in a host of professional developments that is focused on restorative practice, understanding students and institutional racism, and creating curriculum connections. We continue to add more sessions to ensure that all staff have the opportunity to engage in this necessary and valuable professional development. Milwaukee Public Schools hosted a virtual kindergarten enrollment fair on February 5th. The virtual fair was critical for the surrounding families looking to begin their child's formal education. Participation at the fair reached at approximately 760 participants and accounted for over 400 kindergarten applications for the 2022-23 school year. Every day, school counselors impact the lives of students and help children find success in school. This month, we celebrate National School Counseling Week, held from February 7th through February 11th. The training and experience of our school counselors make them an integral part of the total education program. Thank you to all of our school counselors. We continue to work closely with stakeholders as we navigate through the unpredictable changes of COVID-19. In response to these changes, we have added additional testing sites for staff and families. We'll work with our health and safety team along with the MPS school board to revisit COVID-19 protocols. We provided additional supplies to schools and continue working with local and state agencies to ensure that we are current on COVID-19 guidelines. We are excited to share that we have had a number of students placed on youth internships and apprenticeships for the first semester of the school year. Some of the vocational area students were placed in includes hospitality and tourism, health and science, transportation, distribution and logistics, agriculture, food and nutrition resources, arts, audiovisual technology and communications, manufacturing, informational technology, education and training, finance, STEM, science, technology, engineering and mathematics, law, public safety, corrections, and security. And lastly, we were recognized by the Governor Council of Financial Literacy for adopting a graduation requirement for personal finance in 2021. This makes Milwaukee Public Schools one of only 12 urban school districts in the country to put this requirement in place without a state policy. This historical decision guarantees that all students in Milwaukee Public School System will receive financial education. I also want to take this opportunity to recognize and say happy Public School Week, happy Public Education Week. And it's from February 21st through the 25th as we celebrate. President Peterson and members of the board, this concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the board wish to make any comments? Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. And I am wearing my public schools. My heart is in public education. So happy Public Schools Week to all who celebrate. I have a question about the health and safety portion. I have just asking for clarification more than anything. Teacher, parent, and resident of District 8 asked about parent-teacher conferences, if they could be allowed to offer in-person parent-teacher conferences. And her reasoning was just that she's a K-4 mom and she's only been in her child's school twice at this point, once at the K-3 enrollment fair, and then once to pick up a Chromebook. And so she would like to be able to engage in that learning space. And also as she's a K-3 educator, as a speech pathologist. And so she would like to be able to engage with the parents of her students beyond just like the class dojo. And so I was wondering if that's something that the board would need to take action on. And then the other question was about tours. I kind of stumbled upon a conversation happening. Someone, to quote the mother, was, "I'm just frazzled with COVID. I can't tour or get a good feel for anywhere." So I was just wondering if we could allow school leaders the autonomy to make these decisions, if that's the current practice, or if the board could take action on that. So I don't know what the status is of those two.
President Peterson and members of the board, one I will share with you is the idea we are doing parent-teacher conferences just as we did in the first semester of school, where it's virtual, but if a parent want a in-person option, we will grant that in-person option. So that is how we're doing it. So that's one thing. And as far as a tour of a building, we have been giving tours of buildings if they just have to make an appointment. So therefore, we don't have large numbers of people coming into the building at once. So the school administrator will work with any parent or any community member that want to take a tour, because we want to be able to show off all of the wonderful things we have to offer from an educational standpoint in our schools.
So for the parent who would like to do a in-person parent-teacher conference, can she at least work with if the teacher is okay with it, can she make an appointment with the administrator to at least get into her child's classroom? I understand. Here's the deal. You can go back to in-person, and if you offer me virtual, I'm still doing virtual because I find it much more convenient. So I am not saying this because that's something that I would like to do, but as a K-4 parent who hasn't stepped foot in their child's classroom, is that something that they can then talk to their teacher or their administrator of that building and work something out? And if not, then can the board take action to allow this?
Administration.
President Peterson and members of the board, that parent will need to make an appointment with that child's teacher, and they will be able to offer the in-person conference. Also, at the same time, if they want to take a tour of the school, that is a wonderful time to do so. However, the parent wants to take a tour of the school, the parent just needs to reach out to the school administration, and they will be more than happy to engage a tour at any time, even before or after, or either during that particular conference time.
Thank you. I believe that's clear enough. Is that true, Dr. O'Halloran? Sounds good. Okay, Director Taylor.
Thank you, President Peterson. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the Black Lives Matter committee week that works with the NPS and the Black Educators Caucus. We know February is Black History Month, but I know there's been a lot of work being done within the district to make sure that it's just not celebrated in February, but that we're bringing this throughout the whole school year with instructional and curriculum tied to it as well too. So I just want to make sure, a lot of times we don't always shout individuals out that are going that extra mile, and I want to make sure that we give them their due diligence, because they did a lot of hard work to make sure that our students and our families was being able to be engaged and have something that whole week of things to tune into. So I wanted to say once again, thank you all for the work that you did, and let's commit to Black history. It's just not Black history, but it is American history as well.
Thank you very much. Any other comment from the board about the administration's presentation? Okay, seeing none, Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Board of Governance?
Yes, Mr. President. This month we have 4 communications from the Office of Board Governance, which is a lot more than we usually have. And the first communication is action on a request to retire to executive session in order to confer with legal counsel regarding litigation in which the board is or is likely to become involved. The recommendation is that the board determine how it wishes to proceed with this item.
Madam Secretary, if there are no objections, we will defer this item to the end of the meeting. Madam Secretary, any objections? I know this is our general practice.
Okay.
So, excuse me for jumping ahead. Let's see, what is the next communication from the Office of Board Governance?
The next communication from the Office of Board Governance is action on an election district apportionment plan for the election of members of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, and that is being presented pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes 119.08 Parent 1. The recommendation is that the Board 1 waive Board Rule 1.14 and give public hearing on the item, and 2, determine how it wishes to proceed with this item. And this is the item on redistricting.
Since we had no one registered to speak, there's no need to waive the board rule. Let's proceed with the discussion. Will the Office of Board Governance please present this item?
Yes, Mr. President. The Wisconsin statutes specify that continuation of school board districts as follows. 119.08 election of board members, Parent 1, Parent A. The board shall consist of 1 member elected at large and 8 members elected from numbered election districts determined by the board. The election districts shall be subsequently equal in population, and the boundaries of the election districts shall be drawn so as to reflect a balanced representation of citizens in all areas of the city. So after the county completed its process, the city of Milwaukee began its process and completed their redistricting process on January 18th of 2022, which began the board's 60-day timeline to complete the apportionment process. The process for the Milwaukee Board of School Directors to complete its reapportionment plan included 2 public hearings and a presentation from the Legislative Reference Bureau from the city of Milwaukee. And that was with the explanation of proposed plans relative to maps for redistricting. Board members individually held meetings with the Legislative Reference Bureau. So that was individual board members had the opportunity to meet and discuss the maps. And these maps were made public before the board would consider them tonight. To ensure that the public had great access to this information, the Office of Board Governance developed a web page to keep the public apprised of the process and what was happening. On January 25th of 2022, the board did have a public hearing on the maps that were drawn. In addition, the week of January 31st through February 4th, the board and the Legislative Reference Bureau met. February 4th through the 21st, the board conducted individual town hall meetings to be able to connect with their constituents. And we had 7 of those. In addition to that, we actually did publish the maps, and they were included in local papers. Well, one paper that is required by state statute and law is the Daily Reporter, but we also publish the maps in the Milwaukee Times, the Spanish Times, and the Community Journal to ensure that we had a wide variety of presence relative to what the board would be considering. Once the board considers the maps that are before you tonight, any information relative to board districts, schools located in board districts, and the apportionment plan will be published on the district's website in order to keep accurate record of the plan, the process, and the outcome. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Do board members wish to make any comments? I don't see any comments.
Director Herndon has
Okay,
her,
Director
I
Herndon.
believe. Yep.
Thank you. I can't see all of my the people. Director Herndon.
If appropriate, I move that we accept the recommendation of the Office of Board Governance on this item, which is the redistricting and apportionment for the election purposes.
It is. We need a second for that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
members of the board has 2 plans before you, and so the board would need to adopt a plan from one of the plans that is before you. It consists of areas A and B.
Okay.
And I just want to be sure if that is what the board is considering tonight.
Thank you. So what would be appropriate would be a motion to move on one of those two, either A or B. Is that correct?
You have directors Carr, Taylor, and I thought I saw a couple, Director Gokul Gandhi also. No? Okay. You have directors Carr and Taylor in the queue.
But we did have a motion from Director Herndon, and I'm asking her if she has a preference for one or two.
So noted.
I do not have a preference. I'll defer to someone else in this situation.
So why don't you withdraw that motion?
I withdraw that motion. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll move forward. And you said Director Carr and then Director Taylor?
Yes.
Thank you, Director Carr.
So I hope I'm saying this right. I move approval of the Office of Board Governance recommendation to adopt MAP B. Did I say that right?
Director, Madam Secretary, does that?
Mr. Chair, members of the public, the Office of Board Governance is not making a recommendation at all.
Sorry.
And so we are bringing the items before you for you to make a recommendation.
Thank you.
So, Director Carr, you want to make a motion for B, or is that number 2 as well as first designated director, Dr. Mann?
That would be for reapportionment plan B. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Do we need a second on that?
I'll second.
Director Taylor will second, and then she can talk.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, President Peterson, for when we talk about maps and the implementation of the community. Map B serves for all of the communities, but also that was the one that had the least most changes for District 3. With the first map, it had over 6 or 7 schools incorporated, and I thought that was a lot within that one district, although they were decreasing by 2 schools. But map B kind of brought it more together, and it increased by 2 schools, which it decreased by 2 schools, and I felt like it fulfilled the purpose of redistricting, and that's why I am also seconding for map B with Director Carr.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Director Gokul Gandhi.
Am I allowed to move to call the question?
Yeah.
Okay, I move to call the question.
Yeah. Are there any objections to calling the question? Seeing no objection, then we'll just move to the question. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Carr's motion, seconded by Vice President Taylor, which moves adoption of the apportionment plan B as attached to this item as the election district apportionment plan for the election of members of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes 119.08, parent 1. On the motion as read into the record, Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Very good. Madam Secretary, what is the next communication from the Office of Board Governance?
The next communication from the Office of Board Governance is action on a request to sign a letter of support for Act Now to Invest related to dedicating the state budget surplus to K-12 education. The recommendation is that the board, 1, waive board rule 1.14 in order to give public hearing on this item, and 2, determine how you wish to proceed on this item.
Very good. Since we had no one registered to speak, there is no need to waive the board rule. Let us proceed to the discussion. Would the Office of Board Governance please present this item?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the board did receive a letter from the Wisconsin Association of School Boards asking that the board consider the item that is before you. And that is a letter in which there is information that talks about the business community and education community coming together, asking for the state to dedicate some of the state's budget surplus to K-12 education. The item is before you.
Thank you. Do board members wish to make any comments? I see Director Taylor with her hand up.
Thank you, President Peterson. As also the WASB representative, this came to WASB, and I did ask for it to be on our agenda for tonight to make sure. My only pause with this is when it was brought forward, it was stated that they are working within the Milwaukee community. But from my understanding, no one had ever reached out to the Milwaukee School Board of Directors or MPS. And so I would like us to find out more information. Not saying this isn't a great thing, but to make sure that we're just not signing on to be signing on, I would like us to have more details about if we do sign on, what is the process after this, and then how will they work with MPS on retrieving more funding. If this is going to be something for all of the students, to not kind of include the MPS Board of Directors or the district with this decision kind of made me pause a little bit before it went to WASB.
Okay, let me just say that there has been some involvement of the board and the superintendent and Chris Thiel particularly. Perhaps we could hear from Chris, if that's okay, and to fill us in now and then continue the conversation. Would that be okay, Madam Secretary?
So noted.
So, Mr. Thiel?
Certainly. Thank you, President Peterson, members of the board. This is actually, I think, a positive development because there has been, you might recall, about a year ago, we were working with John Kersey of the Zilber Group, who's head of the MPS Foundation. And he brought together a group of Milwaukee-based individuals, businesses, school board members, and others. And we did put forward a letter at that time supporting a 50% reimbursement rate for students with disabilities. As the year went on and as the state budget process moved forward and there was no per pupil adjustment at all for public schools, the need to do something in addition became apparent. And so the additional piece that moved forward is that a decision was made to reach out and have this be more than a Milwaukee-based effort and have it be more of a statewide effort. At that time, as you've referenced, Act Now to Invest, there's a group, the Madison Schools Foundation, in essence, has some individuals who have worked with the Act Now to Invest group, and they, I believe, reached out to the Wisconsin Association of School Boards to ask them to participate in this process. So it's a positive development and hopefully, although a little bit confusing, positive in the sense that as this branches out statewide and we have more entities signing on, the communication lines are kind of growing. And I think what we have before us is something that is looping back and has its origins in work that was started here in Milwaukee. So based on the work we are doing, I think this is certainly in keeping with the MPS legislative agenda and policies that have been supported in the past by the board.
Mr. President, your mic is muted.
Any follow-up, Dr. Taylor?
Nope, I'm just happy to hear that there was some work being done that wasn't brought up at the meeting. And then when I asked, I wasn't informed that we were at the table. So thank you for referencing that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And members of the board, as this work continues, I'm going to ask that this information be shared with the Office of Board Governance so that the entire board can be made aware of the progression.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other comment from board members? What would the board like to do in terms of a motion? Dr. Simpson.
I move that we, not really sure how to say, that we take action to sign this request to support Act Now to Invest relative to dedicating the state budget surplus to K-12 education.
Thank you. A second.
Perfect.
Second.
I think that Director Gilligan has seconded it.
So noted.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, will the secretary please call the roll?
Director Simpson's motion to approve the signing of a letter of support for the Act now to invest relative to dedicating the state budget surplus to K-12 education, seconded by Director Gokul Gandhi. On the motion as read, Director Carr,
Aye.
Director Garcia,
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi,
Aye.
Director Herndon,
Aye.
Director Leonard,
Aye.
Director O'Halloran,
Aye.
Director Simpson,
Aye.
Vice President Taylor,
Aye.
and President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what is the next communication from the Office of Board Governance?
The next communication would be the legislative matters on related issues concerning Milwaukee Public Schools. This is an informational item, and although and no action is required.
Would the Office of Board Governance please present this item?
Yes, Mr. President, Mr. Chris Thiel will continue with the statewide report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mann, President Peterson, members of the board. Chris Thiel, Legislative Policy Manager for Milwaukee Public Schools. And I can touch on actually the effort that we just discussed at the end of this presentation. But as we've been discussing over the last board meetings, we've had the financial updates from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, and the state of Wisconsin has roughly $5.6 billion of available revenue in hand at this moment. And that fact, combined with the fact that the state legislature is at the end of its legislative calendar, caused or created quite a busy month this month with various items moving forward. And I'll touch on a couple of the major ones. As you may have noted in the governor's State of the State speech, his office has not only produced a plan to support K-12 education with that revenue that is available at the state level, but he has now called for a special session in March, calling the legislature in to consider that plan. The plan has any number of benefits to public school districts across the state. It provides a $328 per pupil increase. Again, school districts across the state saw no adjustment. And it moves the special education reimbursement rate up to 40%, and also includes a number of other mental health related items, support for English language learners, a whole package of policy items that are supported by the MPS legislative agenda. So we were very pleased that the governor took the opportunity to craft this plan, and pleased that he has called for a legislative session for the legislature to consider it. That said, if you've been following the news and if you've been following state politics, it does not necessarily seem that that package will pass the legislature. We're going to keep pushing forward on it and talking about the need for it. But I don't want to create a situation here where I'm saying that package will move forward, but hopefully we'll see some positive traction. In addition, the couple of items of note, and there were a number of education items that kind of have been flying through, and this happens at the end of a legislative calendar. It is known in some circles kind of as the silly season, when you just see any number of bills introduced and then scheduled within barely a 24-hour period. Not necessarily a lot of consultation going on or policy development behind some of these things, but this is not unusual for the tail end of a session. A couple of things that, although it's kind of in this vein of the legislative calendar, nonetheless are very problematic. And the main one being the bill that was introduced by Senator Darling that would divide the Milwaukee Public Schools district up into 4 to 8 pieces. We had the opportunity to arrange to have our board president, Peterson, and Dr. Posley testify before the Assembly Education Committee last week. And to give you a sense of how that testimony was going to be considered, a vote on the bill was scheduled for barely 24 hours later. So this is a situation where, as you may have noted in the newspaper, there was no outreach from the author of the bill to us, from either the senator or the assembly author. The assembly author noted that there was no research done behind the bill, and we had a somewhat odd situation where during testimony, Senator Darling stated that for some reason she thought Dr. Posley would be somebody who would want to join in on dividing into 8 pieces, and obviously there was no consultation there. So it just became a situation where it became evident that there was not a lot of research or sound basis for this policy to be introduced. Nonetheless, it's a difficult situation because there have been media reports, there have been folks who have said that they would simply support this bill. But it is further problematic given the fact that over the last 8 years, there's actually been high quality research done and work done by the legislature itself, whether in the form of the No Time to Lose report that Senator Luther Olson participated in, the Task Force on Urban Education, which actually held a meeting here at McDowell High School, the Blue Ribbon Commission report. MPS hosted the first meeting of that commission, and then most recently the Task Force on Racial Disparities. All of those legislative work groups offered policy recommendations that would actually help students across the state and certainly students within Milwaukee Public Schools. In none of those pieces of work product was it ever recommended that the Milwaukee Public School system be broken apart and that somehow would benefit academic achievement. So it is an unfortunate piece of legislation, I would say. It's not in keeping with the legislature's own recommendations to itself. And to be honest, no real reasons have been provided as to why this would be of benefit. And as MPS testified, there are clear reasons why it would have negative consequences for the students in the district and for the community at large. So that's probably the major piece of policy out in the this last month. You also may have noted in today's newspaper, there was another a vote on expanding the voucher program statewide and the cost of that program. We can get into further discussion of that if you like, but the reason that is particularly important to public schools is because the way the funding system is set up is that it would take money from state funds from public school districts and then compel the property tax. You saw the $577 million property tax projection that was put out as part of that bill. So that has not only property tax implications, but that has state funding implications for public schools as well. And I would, touching on the discussion from the last item, my apologies that the information kind of worked its way around the state in the way that it did, but in continuing the work with our community partners here in the city of Milwaukee, and credit to John Kersey again, that policy conversation that started maybe a year ago is continuing, and in this next week on Wednesday, there's going to be an introduction of some information about the need for additional support for our schools. And as we noted in our last meeting, I believe, the Governor Tommy Thompson and the state under his leadership and for a long period of time used to have a policy where schools and students were provided a basic inflationary adjustment, funding to keep pace with the rate of inflation. Funding in the state of Wisconsin has not kept pace with the rate of inflation over the last 10 years or more. And so if we were today to have that same level of support, that would be roughly a $343 per pupil increase. And as was noted in the letter that group put out last year, they supported the governor's recommendation of a 50% reimbursement rate for students with disabilities. So the funds are there. We're hopeful that there's an increasing understanding and acknowledgement that policy needs to be put in place. And so we will continue to push to make sure that students can be supported in an appropriate way. Happy to answer questions if you have them.
President
Board have
Peterson,
any-
you
does
have
the
Director
board-
Gokul Gandhi and Director Leonard in the queue.
Okay, we'll start with Director Gokul Gandhi, then Director Linder. Go ahead.
Thank you. Chris, I would just like some clarification on this 577 million. So there was a article in the paper this morning that talked about DPI's analysis of the bill and the numbers of the students that they projected with the increase of the lift of this is significantly, I mean, it's pretty big. So if we just do some simple math, it feels like 577 is actually quite low. So could you, what's like the actual number, and what is 577 the upper limit? Is it as much as this program is going to allow, or is that just an estimate?
Mr. Thiel.
President Peterson, Director Gokul Gandhi. I think this is a situation where you just kind of apply common sense and you use your basic math. I mean, if anyone's been around this conversation and the board has a policy to make transparent the cost of the program, our board does. So when you send out the property tax bill, there's been a history of kind of confusing math, and there's no magical abacus in Madison where math works a different way. So what you have before you is I think a very reasonable, some might even argue conservative estimate from the Department of Public Instruction that they are asked to produce whenever there is an education policy bill before the committee, so that the committee has an understanding of the ramifications of the policy and the fiscal impact. The individuals who produce that estimate, I think are very careful and take their time. But to your question of kind of total cost, if you've seen the discussions around this, and Governor Walker has put proposals out and others have, the math can actually be pretty simple. I mean, you've heard that the ask for an increase to the per pupil amount for the voucher, for that to be $10,000, sometimes more. There are about 100,000 kids, probably more than that, 100,000 students plus in private schools. So if you simply want to have a ballpark estimate and you multiply 10,000 times 100,000, if that's the eventual goal, to have that level of per pupil funding for all students, which has been the stated policy, at some point the total cost of the program is $1 billion plus, if those policies are in fact enacted. So the math doesn't have to be that hard, depending on how those numbers line up and if that's the objective. But we do end up getting into this conversation of how long will it take? When will this impact occur? And in current state law, they've got a kind of a regulator on the expansion of the voucher program, which is a 1% increase each year until it gets to 10%. And then the cap comes off, and presumably the full cost will go into effect. So really, there's not a lot of debate about what the total cost will be. You kind of multiply the private school enrollment times the policy objective and the per pupil number. And so there's this constant push and pull within the Capitol describing the numbers. Steve Costell, who was the former Republican chair of the Assembly Education Committee, stated publicly, this is one of those moments when people kind of don't want to do the math. So I apologize for the extended answer there, but if you're just kind of wondering, will this cost money? The answer is yes. And then you find a per pupil amount and you multiply it by the enrollment, and you'll be in the range of, if fully enacted, what the program will cost. So circling back, the estimate that DPI puts out, they're duty bound to do that. It's part of the process, and I think they do so carefully.
Thank you. Follow-up, Director Gokul Gandhi.
Yeah, so I just want to contrast this. So we're asking for 700 million for a per pupil adjustment and a 50% reimbursement, which seems to be, I don't know, a problem. Yet people in Madison want to expand this voucher program that's going to cost $1 billion. So whatever special abacus they're using, Mr. Thiel, if you find it, I would love for us to bring it here, because this seems incredibly insane to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Leonard.
Okay. Not so much questions. I think I am understanding that their idea for expanding our district or cutting our district up into little pieces is that they're going to appoint board members versus using the election process. I'm not sure if I'm understanding that correctly. So I guess I should first ask Mr. Thiel if that's true.
Right. Mr. Thiel, could you clarify that, please?
Sure, Director Leonard. The process for dividing up the district would be to give the governor, the mayor, the state superintendent the ability to appoint individuals to a panel that would make the decision how many districts that MPS would be divided into, and then to settle some of the, I mean, it's certainly a complex problem to solve if you take a district in all of its parts and divide it up. But then in terms of school boards, as I understand their plan, there would continue to be elected school board members, 7 board members in each of the new districts that will be created.
And I believe they were elected at large, all of them, at least in one version of this legislation I saw. Director Leonard, anything else?
Yes.
It'd be 56, potentially 56 school board members.
I was just looking at that math. That should make it very interesting, to say the least. That would be a disaster. The very thought that we're going to take our city and have 56 different people interacting in a open enrollment system, the thought of it gives me an aneurysm. I'll be honest with you. I can't imagine doing that in any way efficiently. I just have to make a comment. I've been living through this for so many years, for so many times, and so has President Peterson and most everybody here. And I find that we have been systematically cutting and slicing and dicing our district for the 28 years that I've been here, going on 30 years. So every time that I hear their argument, and their argument is often the fact that they don't believe that we can do the job that we require to do to make our students successful. And there's some justification on when you look at test scores and whatnot. But the reality is they've been cutting and making cuts to our program for so long, our district for so long, that I don't even know how they can justify their actions anymore. I mean, if they would just give us back those cuts, I can imagine our school district doing 10 times better than what it's doing right now at the least. So I just need to make that public comment. I'm highly irritated with insane plans that they come up with to find ways to dismantle public education in the biggest city in the state. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Taylor.
Thank you, President Peterson. I guess I have more comments than questions. Just when you think about MPS and the splitting us up, and often I feel like these decisions are often made with people who have never worked in MPS, who's not a part of the MPS community, who never had a child who attended or went to MPS, making decisions for our students, our babies, our community, is a big issue for me. And I just want us to continue as we stand together and push forward. I have no idea where this will end. I guess I do have a question for Chris Thiel. I guess what was the consensus when you guys were in Madison? I heard one parent or advocacy say they waited maybe over 5 hours up there. And I just wanted to know what was the consensus as people were talking and they were meeting for Madison and with this decision to break MPS up. I'm never surprised, but I want to think in my mind, there's no way it will happen. But being Milwaukee and this being Wisconsin, I don't want to ever take anything for granted. So also, what else can we do to ensure that this does not happen?
Chris, excuse me, Mr. Thiel.
Certainly. And Director Taylor, I think your concerns are well-founded. I think you're watching the politics at the national level and the state level. And we are in a different moment than we've have been in the past. So I wouldn't take anything for granted. We were able to have, I think, reasonable conversations with folks who are willing to listen And I should note that it was not a unanimous vote on the Republican side. State Representative Joel Kitchen, who himself had served up in the Sturgeon Bay School District for 12 years, and he served as a co-chair of the Blue Ribbon Commission on K-12 Education, and has, I think, a deeper understanding of education policy. He voted against the plan to break MPS up. And I should note, he also voted against the voucher expansion plan because I think he understood the fiscal impact. But I think it will take some work to continue to frankly, picking up off the testimony presented by President Peterson and Dr. Posley. The work that needs to be done is to bring the community together, bring state members together to support students. And we know that that's the work that will improve academic achievement. That was the theme of the testimony. That's what their own research points out. And we've had policies taken away from our students that we need to have brought back that will in fact support them. So I do think we have work to do. I do think we have to continue to reach out to partners. We're going to have an election at the end of this year that will be consequential. And then the legislative session will begin in January of 2023. So everything we can do to continue to tell the positive stories of how we are supporting students and continue those efforts to bring our partners together. I think we have to do that work because I don't think we can take anything for granted.
Thank you. Anything else, Dr. Taylor?
I'm a lot, but I'll just stop there and say thank you for your work on this, President Peterson and Christelle and the superintendent for going up there and let us all rally together to get our community together as we continue to fight for our babies in our school district and community.
Thank you. Dr. Simpson.
Thank you. So first of all, just sharing my colleagues' disappointment, anger, and frustration at the suggestion that breaking up the district into these smaller entities would do anything beneficial. And just, shame on people for not looking, our elected leaders for not looking at things that have been put forward that actually are based in research instead of just coming up with a plan that we can all see would be very detrimental, not only to MPS, but to just to the larger community. The last thing that Milwaukee needs is additional reasons to be fragmented from one another. We are already a very segregated city, and when we talk about bringing people together, this is a step in the exact opposite direction. And then just, as Director Leonard said, we've been fighting these battles for a very long time, and MPS is always the target. And you have to just look at, what is the hidden agenda and not such a hidden agenda as why MPS is always the target. And then just ending, kind of piggybacking on what Director Taylor said, that as, people who are watching and listening, to be those, it has to be a community effort to share those positive stories, to be upset, to find a way to share your voice and your frustration so that something like this doesn't happen now or in the future, and that elections matter, and to always be looking for candidates who back and support public education, because you just never know when something's going to be knocking at your door to attack your community and your public education system. So, and yes, thank you, Mr. Thiel, for the work that you do. It is deeply appreciated.
Thank you. Dr. O'Halloran.
Thank you, President Peterson. I'm just going to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. I did laugh when Director Leonard brought up that, this is just a retread of so many other efforts, because when I first heard about this plan, I laughed that I still have my no takeover sign in my front window from the last time they tried and failed. So it really does feel like just Groundhog Day, right? They keep doing the same thing and they keep failing with this. And when I actually took the time to read the bill, it made me laugh even more, because our constituents come to us with so many requests, right? They ask for us to reduce class sizes. They ask for us to strengthen special education. These are all recommendations that they're being the legislature's own, these are recommendations in their own report with the Blue Ribbon Commission on education funding. And they put that on a shelf, right? And they've done nothing with it. And at no point, and this is what made me laugh though, at no point has any constituent ever come to us and said, I have a problem and the only thing that will solve it is 19 to 47 new school board directors, right? We know what the problems are and they have the solutions and they are sitting on a pile of money, our own money, right? Wisconsin's money. And they have the power to improve the educational experience, not just for our students, but for every student in the state of Wisconsin. And so I'm sure that none of them are tuning in. As they have admitted, they have no connection to Milwaukee. So I'm sure they're not listening. But if they were, I would just implore them to revisit their own recommendations and do right by their own constituents as well as ours. So thank you for taking the time to educate us, Mr. Thiel, and thank you to President Peterson and Dr. Posley for going to explain to the legislature the many ways that this plan would fail our students.
Yes, thank you. Director Herndon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I found myself very upset when this was introduced into the media because I do have a history as well of being in Madison. I think this was one of the first times I missed speaking for this very issue as it has reappeared in our lives over and over again, starting with 2009. I can also say that it's pretty much typically the same players that are leading the charge. In my personal opinion, what I've seen is simply this. It's kind of like the poem "And Still We Rise" by Maya Angelou. In spite of all the obstacles that have been put forth in front of us over these past 20 years or so, we still rose. We still managed the funds, pinch pennies. We had to cut services to our students far, far too much, but we still survived. And I felt like, we struggled, we survived, and COVID came along. We got additional funding to do some very, very much needed things to our buildings. And it's like, oh, now you're really doing too well. So let's try to knock you back down a couple inches, you know? That's pretty much my opinion of what this is all about. I think they're very, very serious. The Assembly passed their portion of the bill or their vote this week, and now it's up to the Senate. And they use the test scores of our students as excuses for this without any analysis or thought processes or coming into our district and seeing really what's been going on, because I feel that those legislators, those that have definitely been involved in this movement for so many years to destroy MPS initially, now it's public education statewide, they have a lot of the cross to bear of where we are today, doing to the many dirty-handed, underhanded deeds that they have done to our district and to our kids, to the many unfunded mandates that they have put on our district, which trickle down to our students as well as our teachers. So yes, I am very upset, but I do feel that there's a lot of work that we do need to do moving forward, educating our parents, educating our students. I'm sure our students hear this and they're concerned as well. What's going to happen? That would be normal for a child. So I feel that the district board directors and parents, we're all going to have to do an excellent job of messaging first and foremost, and trying to calm the nerves all the way around. And thank you, Mr. Thiel, for all your hard work. I've observed it over the years and been up there with you far too many times as well. So thanks for the work and keep the information coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Director Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question for Mr. Steele is, can you expand a little bit on, I guess, like the implication of real estate? I know in this bill it also mentions how a transfer specifically of like buildings, grounds, and school sites. Like, what does that mean? And like, what would that impact be? Because I think it's really important for us to understand that not only is this about, you know, the attack of, you know, public education, but really trying to go after our assets, which is a big part of, you know, assets, you know?
But I could try to answer that, and then I think hope those are a lot of questions that are kind of vague and unanswered. But I think it is interesting to your point that, and to Director Herndon's point about, and to Director and frankly to everybody who's been a part of this process. And I should say thank you to the board for your advocacy, because having a board so involved has been very important to this process, crucial. Obviously. But the facilities piece, I think, harkens back to a takeover attempt that was part of something even maybe 12 years ago at this point, where during the series of agitate toward MPS, I would adopt Director Herndon's language about how this has come up multiple times. There was one point in time where, again, it was Senator Darling, where there was a land grab, basically, that an attempt to come for facilities, even prior to the what is called the creative name, the Opportunity Schools Partnership Program, which is basically another takeover of MPS program. It's not 100% clear how the facilities portion would play out. I think as I read the bill, there is acknowledgement based on that past history that the City of Milwaukee and Milwaukee Public Schools have a unique relationship with regard to school facilities. But again, we wound up in this situation when Senator Darling testified about her bill, that she was trying to make it seem as if the Milwaukee community would have all the choice without acknowledging that nobody in the Milwaukee community wants this process. And so I think the furthest we got with understanding any of these details would be, if this were to be passed into the law, all the work of making it functionable would be left on the plate of those in Milwaukee. And those in Milwaukee are saying, this is not a workable plan. So I apologize, I don't have more specifics there, but frankly, those specifics are not that well defined in the bill.
Thank you. I just wanted to also call that to attention. And yes, it's not defined. It's part of the nebulous part of the whole bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to pass the gavel to Director Taylor, Vice President Taylor, and just make a few comments myself.
So noted.
Director
Thank you.
Peterson.
Thank you. I just want to put it in the broadest historical perspective that I know, which is there has been an attempt ever since Brown v. Board to defund many public schools, or in some cases close public schools and set up private voucher schools in the South. This is in the late 50s. And there has been an effort by right-wing ideologues like Milton Friedman and groups like the Bradley Foundation, the Kochs, Betsy DeVos, and their goal is to eliminate public education. Their goal, and a lot of it stated directly, is they think there should be no public education. There should be private schools that people get paid public tax dollars for. And we, unfortunately, in Milwaukee, were the petri dish to develop that. And once, it started as a small program. Unfortunately, the governor at that time vetoed the sunset provision of the program as it passed in legislation. And especially once the Supreme Court ruled that religious schools could be involved, we've seen this incredible increase. Slowly, the income limit has been raised. Now it's up to 300%. Like you could be $79,000 income and get free schooling. And what the ultimately, I raise that because it's within that context that they're attacking the largest public school, the largest district that has the most people of color and children of color, and they have systematically pursued an austerity budget, trying to make us look bad, and then say, okay, the solution is to get rid of them or to cut us up or to whatever, and to fund private schools. And I think people ask, well, what can we do? Obviously, if we have a Republican governor next time, it's going to be a disaster obviously for public schools, but probably for most public institutions. And so one thing is, of course, to make sure our current governor gets reelected. And secondly, to really try to communicate it with all our colleagues and comrades and relatives and friends across the state that what the Republicans are doing to their school systems and ours, because it's so blatant and it's so against the notion of a public entity, of public service. I like to always quote a woman writer from India, Arundhati Roy, who says the privatization of essential infrastructure is essentially undemocratic. And that's what it's about. I mean, I've read one, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's only one Republican legislator who is willing to say that publicly Joe Biden was elected president fair and square. That just sort of shows their approach to democracy, and these two bills in particular emphasize that as well. And so a lot of work to do in the coming months. It's really a life and death struggle for public education in this state. I will accept back the gavel.
So noted.
And any other comments? Seeing none? Are there some? There's one? No? Yes, go ahead, Chris.
President Peters, and my apologies, and we've had this discussion. I think the comments about where we are absolutely 100% accurate. And, I'm sometimes asked what people can do in addition to support policies that would support MPS students. And if people would like to put a call into an email into the governor's office or your representatives to support the governor's proposal for K-12 education, that would be a meaningful activity over these next coming weeks to just make sure that our voices are heard for the positive things that could benefit our students. So thank you.
Thank you. And I see Director O'Halloran has her hand up. Go ahead, Director.
Thanks. One more question. It has come up that Senator Darling has repeatedly put forth these efforts. Has she ever once considered valuing Milwaukee children as much as the children in her neighborhood? Because I think, do you know what the difference is between what a child in Milwaukee is valued at versus what a child in like Nicolay is? I think it's like $8,000-9,000. I mean, I don't know if you have that number handy. I know this is kind of left field.
Mr. Thiel.
Director Halloran, to your point, and this brings us back to the referendum and the attempt that the board has made to put our students on an equal footing as other students. Even with the passage of the referendum, the revenue limit per pupil for MPS is certainly significantly lower than the Nicolay School District. So to your point about policy and fairness and even just equality on the per pupil funding, and that doesn't even get us to equity, we still don't quite have that parity with some districts.
So she hasn't considered, that hasn't been a proposal that she's ever considered or put forward?
I have not seen such a proposal from her.
Okay.
No.
Thanks.
Director Herndon. Director Herndon, would you like to speak?
I was muted. I just wanted to share this for Director Garcia's answer in relation to the property takeover, that type of thing. The last move, and Mr. Thiel, I'm sure remembers this, that was the omnibus where the county executive was supposed to be the czar to take over the schools. And that piece of legislation is still on the books. So my concern is that that could be used as part of this whole move. I just wanted to share that quickly.
Thank you. I see Mr. Thiel's nodding in agreement. Okay.
Oh,
Go
yes, I
ahead.
am.
Go ahead.
To Director Herndon's point, yes, there is still state statute that is active right now that causes a concern on top of this additional move. So I think Director Herndon is certainly well versed, given her direct participation in pushing back against that. But yes, it's a good reminder that that's still out there.
Well, thank you, everyone, for your comments. Let us move forward. Madam Secretary, what is our next item of business?
The next item on tonight's agenda is the monthly report from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Okay. Would somebody like to offer that report?
Thank you, President Peters and Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. In the interest of time, that report is before you. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Does anybody on the board have a question for Mr. Chasen? Seeing none, what's our next item of business, Madam Secretary?
The next item of business is the report of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, the student expulsions.
Okay, any comment from the administration?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the board would need to accept, reject, or modify the reports.
Okay, what is the wishes of the board? Director Herndon.
Okay, I move that we accept the recommendation of the independent hearing officers in terms of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors related to the student expulsions.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, would you please read the roll?
On Director Herndon's motion to accept the reports of the independent hearing officers, seconded by Director Garcia. Director Carr?
Aye.
Director Garcia?
Aye.
Director Gokul-Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Herndon?
Aye.
Director Leonard?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Director Simpson?
Aye.
Vice President Taylor?
Aye.
And President Peterson?
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Well, we now will have the reports of the standing committees. Since public hearing was given at the committee meetings, the board, as is customary, will not be given public hearing on these reports this evening. Madam Secretary, what is the first report?
The first report is that of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item number 10, action on monthly facilities matters, has been set aside at the request of Director O'Halloran. Item number 12, the report with possible action regarding data and progress associated with reviewing school requests utilizing ESSER 3 funding for additions and/or renovation projects has been set aside at the request of the administration.
Hey, do any board members wish any other items to be set aside? I see none, Madam Secretary. Do you see any?
I do not.
Okay, then Madam Secretary, what's the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish to set aside any of those items? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. No items of this report has been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish to set aside anything from this committee? Seeing none, let's get a motion and action on the motion for the balance of the reports of the standing committees. Could I have a motion?
You have Director O'Halloran and Director Simpson in the queue.
Okay, Director O'Halloran.
I move that we accept the recommendations of the committees, the balance of the standing committees.
Thank you. And Director, who is her name?
Simpson?
Simpson, excuse me. Director
I'll
Simpson.
second.
Thank you. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
On Director O'Halloran's motion to approve the balance of the reports of the standing committees, and that is outside of the two items that have been set aside, seconded by Director Simpson. On the motion to approve the balance of the reports, Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, excuse me. Madam Secretary, what is the next item?
Mr. President, we are now back to the items that were set aside. The first item that was set aside is from the report of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. That is item number 10 on monthly facilities matters, the FMS Awards of Professional Services Contracts recommendation, and the report with possible action regarding the air quality report. Your committee recommends approval of the administration's recommendation. This item has been set aside at the request of Director O'Halloran.
Director O'Halloran, your comments, please.
Thank you. I would move that we continue to approve administration's recommendations. I just wanted to also move, so we've been hearing the air quality reports monthly, and I think when we requested those monthly updates, it was more about ventilation audits, and what we're hearing is kind of more of the monthly updates from like the IPD teams and whatnot. So I was hoping that I could just move that the administration provide to the board quarterly air quality reports, and that the reports include any ventilation audit report results, so that it's rather than producing a report every month, we would still get that. It would just be on a quarterly basis.
Secretary, would that be possible for the administration to agree to that? Or do you recommend that we make a motion, use our power to make a motion and do so?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, given that the board required monthly air quality reports at this point, what I'm hearing is that Director O'Halloran would like to approve the monthly facilities matters as recommended by the committee, and ask the administration to provide quarterly air quality reports. Is that?
Yes. Then let's ask the administration. Administration, what do you feel about
President
quarterly
Peterson and
reports?
members of the board, the answer is yes, and we will gladly be able to provide quarterly reports. Thank you for the recommendation, Director O'Halloran.
Director O'Halloran, is that okay with you?
Yep.
Okay. Any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
We would need a second.
Oh, we did get a second. Director Herndon has just completed that second, and we're on. Go ahead.
On Director O'Halloran's motion to approve the committee's recommendation relative to the monthly facilities matters, the FMS Awards of Professional Services Contracts and Materials Purchases recommendation, the report with possible action regarding air quality, and direct that the administration provide to the board quarterly air quality reports, and that the reports include any ventilation audit results on the motion as read into the record. Director Carr,
Aye.
Director Garcia,
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi,
Aye.
Director Herndon,
Aye.
Director Leonard,
Aye.
Director O'Halloran,
Aye.
Director Simpson,
Aye.
Vice President Taylor,
Aye.
and President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you. What's the next item of business, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Chair, the next item that was set aside is item number 12 from the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel, which is a report with possible action regarding the data and progress associated with reviewing school requests utilizing ESSER 3 funding for additions and/or renovation projects. The committee, your committee having received this item as a report, this item does not require action. However, the administration is requesting that the board act on the items presented.
Administration, your comments, please.
President Peterson and members of the board, we're requesting that the board take action on this item. One of the reasons why is because from an equity standpoint, equity lens, we went back and made sure that schools that were under $100,000 were moved upward. There was a number of schools that we had to find the projects that needed to be done within their school. So all schools now basically the minimum is on $100,000, and this is a total separate allocation from the $100,000 that was set aside for school communities. We had about 12 different schools where we had to go back out and do an inventory walk to make sure there were some schools that in the first round was not funded. We went back to those schools as well to see what we could do with the project, and after which we were able to come back with a well-rounded plan where we have addressed everyone that made a request. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And just to clarify, this item, Madam Secretary, was passed by the committee. We did hear examples of how that equity lens was used, but the administration wants us to make sure that it's voted by on the full board. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, this item was presented as a report, so the committee did not act on this item. This item is before you tonight for action.
Great. Okay. Could I get a motion and comments? Let's get a motion first.
Mr. Chair, just for clarity, I want, and for the administration to weigh in to make sure that I'm capturing this correctly. What the administration is asking the board to do is to accept the report and to approve the funding for the projects as outlined in the report. Is that correct?
Is that correct?
I see head nodding.
President Peterson and members of the board, that is correct.
Great. Would somebody like to make a motion? It's very similar to that. Director Leonard, then Director Leonard first.
I move to accept the reports as presented by the administration.
Okay, and Director O'Halloran?
I will second that, and I think I don't know if we need to add on that we are approving the funding for that. I don't.
Right.
I would defer to what Madam Secretary would have to say about that.
Yeah, Madam Secretary, could you clarify that, please?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the motion before you would be to accept the report regarding data and progress associated with reviewing school requests utilizing ESSER 3 funding for the additions and/or renovation projects as outlined in the attachment to this item.
Okay, that's pretty clear. Any comment? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On the motion as read into the record, moved by Director Leonard, seconded by Director O'Halloran. On the motion as read, Director Carr?
Aye.
Director Garcia?
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Herndon?
Aye.
Director Leonard,
Aye.
Director O'Halloran,
Aye.
Director Simpson,
Aye.
Vice President Taylor,
Aye.
and President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Are there any other items set aside, or shall we should proceed with the agenda, I believe. Yes? Yes.
Mr. Chair, you are correct.
Okay, so Madam Secretary, are there items of regular business?
Yes, Mr. President, there are 2 items of regular business. Item 1 is the report of the board's delegates, and we have 2 reports this month. The first report is that of the board's delegate to CISA 1.
Okay. Would that delegate like to report?
I submitted that this afternoon, so you have that in the records. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, the next report.
The next report is that of the board's delegate to the Head Start Policy Council.
Thank you. That's
go
me. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go right ahead.
Yeah, that report is before you. Happy to answer any questions. And just a reminder, this is in our time to enroll in Head Start K3, K4, and K5. So get out there and get your kids enrolled. Thank you.
What's the deadline deadline for that? Do you know offhand, Director Simpson?
Oh, March something.
Okay.
Early March. I don't have the date off the top of my head. I'm so sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I apologize. If the administration can just let us know that and publicize that, and know that's something that we can all.
It's like through that first week of March, if I'm correct. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Madam Secretary, next item.
The next item of regular business is the monthly report of the president of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
And that's before you as well. Any questions, you're welcome to ask. Madam Secretary, are there any items of unfinished business?
Mr. President, we have no unfinished business.
Okay. Madam Secretary, are there any items of new business for referral by committee?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have one item of new business for referral, and that item is a request to adopt a medication administration policy for Milwaukee Public Schools.
Okay, this item will be referred to the Committee on Legislation, Rules, and Policies. Madam Secretary, are there any communications for referral to committee?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have one communication for referral, and that is communication number 2122C-005 from the Milwaukee Teachers Education Association on a proposed policy on filling principal vacancies.
This item will be referred to the Committee on Legislation, Rules, and Policies. Madam Secretary, are there any resolutions for referral to committee?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have one resolution for referral, and that is Resolution 2122R-15 by Director Carr on a feasibility study to implement a 4-day school week.
That item will be referred to the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Mr. President, we are now back to the item that was previously deferred to the end of the meeting, and that is Communication 1 from the Office of Board Governance. Action on a request to retire to executive session to confer with legal counsel regarding litigation in which the board is or is likely to become involved.
I will now entertain a motion to retire to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851G, which allows a governmental body to enter into a closed session to confer with legal counsel for legal counsel for a governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is likely to become involved. Would anyone care to make that motion? Director Garcia.
I move that we retire to executive session.
Do we have a second for that?
I'll second.
Okay, Director Taylor seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, Madam Secretary, please read the roll.
On Director Garcia's motion to retire to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Parent 1, Parent G, seconded by Director Taylor. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson,
Aye.
Vice President Taylor,
Aye.
and President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
At this time, the board will retire to executive session for the purpose of stated previously. The board will reconvene in open session to take action on matters considered in executive session, or the board will retire from executive session. Will the secretary please note the time?
So noted. So everybody should.